So Ketu in the sign of Venus, while Rahu's in the sign of Mars. Ketu in the sign of Venus makes people's security paradigm evolve around their fulfillment. Their idea is, so long as I'm fulfilled, so long as I'm getting what I need met by this world, I will be okay. And so they're very adept at getting the world and everyone in the world to please them, to provide for them, to give them what they need. Okay? And these people are in some ways the opposite of Ketu in Mars' sign. Ketu and Mars sign people can sometimes be difficult to get along with because the whole security paradigm is, don't challenge me, or challenge me and I will win. Okay? Where the Ketu in Venus signs, they don't have a chip on their shoulder, they're very non-challenging. They can be very strong and fiery depending on other things in their charts, okay? But they're not antagonistical, they're not confrontative. And in fact, in talking to them, you can just tell them things about themselves that are horrible things sometimes. And they'll just be really charming about it. Whereas if you tell a Ketu and Aries person something really bad about themselves, they're going to challenge you on it. But the Ketu in the sign of Venus will just smooth it over and make it a pleasant thing. And it's all just part of the pleasant, lovely conversation you're having with the person. So at the end of it, you're just really ready to, provide for them and give to them because they just come off as such a lovely person. So these people have managed to make themselves very likable. And through being very likable, they've achieved a lot in the world. Because Venus is all about likes, really. Ultimately what we like can be indicated by Venus. Okay, it's very much the planet of what we like. So these people's security paradigm is, as long as I can get people to like me, everything's going to be okay. I'll be able to get what I need, I'll be able to survive this world. But I have to be likable. And so you'll see these people make a lot of effort to be likable. Okay? And it usually works. Okay? You'll like them. But if you get closer to them and you get to know them better, you'll see that while you really like them, you also are very, very frustrated at them. And the reason you'll be frustrated with them is because of their Rahu in the sign of Mars. And the Rahu in the sign of Mars makes them be weak in exerting themselves. In saying, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to do what I have to do. And also the other part of Mars is that self-restraint. And I'm going to have self-restraint. The Ketu in the sign of Venus can be so intent on making people like them that it can make people like them in ways that maybe aren't always that healthy. Okay, so they can play games, they can be dishonest. By dishonest, I mean they can make people feel better, make people think they like them more than they really do even. They might do things that aren't really what they want to do because the need to be liked so that they can share and get what they need is so strong. Okay, there's a great need for sharing when Ketu's in the sign of Venus. But then when that comes with a lack of self-restraint thanks to Rahu in the sign of Mars, and when that comes, the main reason you might find yourself getting frustrated with them is because they don't want to work hard for something. And you might tell them, look, all you have to do is work hard, and in 6 months, a year, 5 years, it'll all come together. And they're like, no way. Okay? See, Mars is a planet of getting the job done. And if getting the job done takes 20 years, Mars will sit there and do it for 20 years. People will say Mars is impatient. You might hear that sometimes. Oh, you got a strong Mars, you're impatient. No. A good Mars is very patient. That's why Mars is exalted in Capricorn, a very patient sign. But a good Mars is patient. It's like, yeah, it's going to take this long to get the job done, therefore I will work the job that long. And then I'll get my fulfillment afterwards. But when Rahu's in the sign of Mars, it essentially afflicts the person's Mars energy. And now they're impatient. So you can just tell them in a really common sense way, you just have to work yourself up the food chain. You just have to progress along this way. And they're like, no way. They don't want to do it. They'll say, oh, okay, and then they won't do it. The idea of having to exert themselves in a certain way that guarantees a result, to them is like, no. So if they're in a tough relationship, and you say, look, you just have to work this, just have to do this, they'll say, oh, okay, that's all I have to do. But then they'll go home and think, all I need to do is find someone else to like me more. And when that person likes me more, they'll do everything I want. And then I'll just get rid of my old boyfriend. So that's the idea. There's always an easy way out that doesn't include hard work, effort, persistence, and self-restraint. That's what they're always looking for. This idea that they're going to actually have to bust their ass for something is a really foreign idea. The idea that they really have to fight for something is a foreign idea. One client had a Ketu in the sign of Venus, fell in love with someone with tons of obstacles between that couple and the potential altar, marriage altar down the road. Tons of obstacles, okay? And so they came to me and I said, look, this can totally be worked out. That's step 1, step 2, step 3. It'll work. It's going to take a little time. You guys don't even live in the same part of the world, but it's all doable. And you guys have an amazing connection, and so you know it's what you want. They're like, oh, okay. But then, instead of following step A, B, C to a conclusion that would have worked, they were just like, well, there's this other person who, lives down the road who really wants me, and I think I'm just going to have a relationship with them. So that's what they decided. So they came in with this other person's chart. And they're like, oh, I just think I'm just going to have a relationship with them because it can work with them. And I'm like, if it can work with the other person, you're going to have to fight for it. And they're like, yeah, but this one works. And so this idea of having to fight for something that they really wanted was too foreign for them. They weren't going to fight for something they really, really wanted. They'd rather have something inferior that just worked in a nice, easy way. Had inside another person, this person was like a friend who also had a Ketu in the sign of Venus. And they would always be happy to have, just like in products, like say in house products, like in products in your house. Vacuum cleaners, blenders, food processors, There's better ones and there's worse ones. And they would rather have a worse one that just kind of did itself than a better one that they had to actually figure out how to work it. They'd rather have an ugly table in their house than the table that they had to figure out how to assemble because it only came disassembled. They'd rather buy the one that was assembled that they didn't like as much. So anything that took an active, logical effort on their part, which was Mars, they didn't want to engage in. Because this idea that they have to exert themselves is a threatening idea to them. Because the Ketu and Venus security paradigm is, I can get through this life without sweating, by not, looking, by not putting myself in a challenging situation, by doing things in the easiest path of least resistance possible, everything will work out as best as possible. And so when a situation comes where they actually have to exert themselves, focus on something, struggle with something, they're like, no, I can't do that. And that'll come out as impatience. These people will appear very impatient because we got an afflicted by Rahu Mars signs, which basically means Mars can't work as well because his houses are troubled by Rahu. And so you might just see it because of they might just be impatient. They're like, no, I don't want to wait. And you just might see it as impatient. Because one of the things about Venus is the place you go to buy things. It's about buying and trading, right? So when you want something, you just go get it. So if you want some oranges, you just go to the store and get them. Okay? And you trade for them. You trade your cash for the oranges. If you wanted to grow oranges right now, depending on where you live, you might have to wait 6 months, 8 months, 9 months to get your orange. And you don't want to wait that long, so you're just going to go to the store and buy oranges from Argentina or something because they're growing in Argentina now or whatever. So one of the reasons we buy things, which is Venus, is because we can have them right now. We can have them right now without waiting for them. Okay? And so when Ketu's in the sign of Venus, people don't want to wait for things. Because their security paradigm is all about, I can find a way to get this now. And that makes them feel secure. This idea that I can find a way to have this now. So that one example I gave about the relationship that would take a couple of years to sort out all the detail, they're like, oh, but I can have this relationship now. So the same way, if you grow your own oranges and wait 9 months to eat them, they're going to be much tastier oranges than the one you went to the store and bought. No, they don't want to wait 9 months, so they go to the store and get oranges that aren't as good. So the same thing for this person in their relationship. But I can have a relationship right now. It doesn't matter that it's not as good a relationship. Okay? And so ultimately what happens with these people, because they haven't exerted themselves towards things, things aren't fulfilling enough. All right? So when the person just gets the relationship that's easier and convenient, it ends up not really meaning a lot to them. Where if they'd fought and done the struggle they needed to make that other relationship work, they would have invested in it and fought for it. And that goal, when they had that goal, when they had that guy in her arms, would have meant something. Okay? Taking the path of least resistance oftentimes gives us something that doesn't really mean something. So there's always a balance between Mars and Venus. When you fight for something, when you struggle for something, when you work for something, then it becomes really worthwhile to have it. If it's just for free, just kind of take it for granted. And so that's what happens. Person, eventually took the other guy for granted and started just seeing him as a fool. And that didn't work either. Okay? So, the Rahu in the sign of Mars needs to learn that, okay, you know what you want to be fulfilled with. Deep down inside you do, but you have to work for it. You have to fight for it. And the things you fight for and struggle for, those are going to be the most rewarding. The orange you grow is going to taste better because you grew it than the orange that you can just go to the store and get. Okay? The love you fought for is going to taste better because you fought for it than the love that is free. Okay? That's just there. So it's about a balance. Just as the Ketu in the sign of Mars would be over in balance towards the activity, and therefore not do activities focused on fulfillment, the Ketu in the sign of Venus person, we so focus on what can give fulfillment that they forget that if they don't work for it, it can't really be that fulfilling. It's kind of like if you're not hungry, eating food doesn't taste good. Okay? But if you work all day long to have a meal at the end of the day, that meal is going to taste really yummy. But if you're sitting around all day doing nothing and get a nice meal at the end of the day, it's not going to taste nearly as good as if you were working all day long for a meal. So imagine the old days, people in some cultures would work all day long just to have a couple meals a day. Okay? So imagine how good each of those meals had to taste. When after hours of labor, they finally got to sit down and get this meal because of all their hard labor. It was like, oh, this is so good. And so the Rahu in the sign of Mars person needs to overcome their fear of fighting for things and exerting themselves. They literally feel that, no, it won't work. If you can explain it to them how, yes, this will work. This plan is guaranteed to work to get you what you want. But they'll just go, no, that won't work. I can't do that. That won't work. That's not possible. That's how they feel. They feel like it just won't work for them. That exerting themselves, no, that doesn't work. No, it doesn't work from their point of view. And so they don't want to work towards it because they don't think they'll succeed. So it's not like they're like, oh, I'll just take the orange from the store or I'll just take the guy next door. They think, well, if I try to grow my own orange tree, it's certainly going to die and I'll have no oranges. So I might as well go get the orange from the store. If I try to make this relationship work with this person that doesn't even live around me, it's going to take a couple of years to sort everything out. No, that's not going to work. I know that won't work. It just won't work and I'll have nothing. So I'm better off going out with the guy who lives down the street, who's convenient. Because they literally don't think that their exertions are going to get them what they want. So then they settle and take what's sitting right there. And that's ultimately the problem. They need to have the courage to say, okay, I'm going to try to exert myself for what I really want. I'm going to fight for what I really want. And I believe that I can achieve it. Okay? But they usually don't believe it. That's the problem. They don't believe it. So they actually have to come to the point where Ketu falls apart, and the things they can just get conveniently end up having no more meaning for them, and their life is not working. And they're miserable, and they feel completely unfulfilled. And then they say, screw it. I'm just gonna go for it this time. And they won't even feel like they're gonna succeed. They still won't feel like they can succeed usually. But they say, I'm just gonna go for it, because I'd rather just go for it and die at this point than to stay in this quality of life that I have, which ultimately is not fulfilling. Okay? So the way life is, we get some Venus, then we use our Mars to build on that and make it more fulfilling. Okay? Life is always about moving forward and taking what we need and moving forward. So like in a relationship, which is a Venus thing, you get a relationship, so it's not about just getting the relationship and stopping then. At that point, you need to put energy, Mars, into your relationship to move forward with that relationship and do amazing things with that person, right? The Ketu in the sign of Venus, though, doesn't understand that when you get something nice, now is the time to start working. Their idea is, okay, I got something nice, everything's going to be okay. It's like, no. You got something nice, and this is the perfect place to begin working. That's what they need to learn. So, not realizing that, everything nice they get, because they don't put the right kind of effort into it, it always decays. And then they end up with nothing. So once they learn that, I get something that's pretty good, but to really make it good, I have to polish it through effort and put energy into it, and then I'll have something that's really good. Then they go to the Mars, they put the energy into the thing, and then they come back to the Venus signs, the Ketu in the Venus signs, and they have more fulfillment with it. The thing is, the fulfillment, the happiness, whatever, the security even we get with Ketu's position is not enough. It never is. That's why we have to go to Rahu to polish that Ketu stuff, and then we can go back to Ketu and have something that's truly good. So in the Ketu in the sign of Venus, it's getting what's there, something beautiful in their life, then putting energy and working into it and polishing it to something that's super amazing, that's really worth having. And at that point, they go back to Ketu. So you have a relationship, and then you work on the relationship. But the Ketu in the sign of Venus, when they get something, they think that's the end of it. They think, oh, I have it. It all should be perfect now. And when it's not, and when the next day they're called upon to adapt, to work on themselves, to work on their partner, to struggle forward together, they're like, oh, this isn't right. You know, this isn't right. I have to work for this? No, I had it yesterday. It should always be as beautiful as it was yesterday. And they need to learn that whatever they get that's beautiful, it has to be worked on. One person I know who's got a Ketu in the sign of Venus grew up in a rich family, and every 2 or 3 years, their parents leased them a new Mercedes. So they're driving a 2 to 3 year old Mercedes every 2 to 3 years. And their parents are paying like $7,000 a year or something, or more. A tremendous amount of money for her to basically rent a car for a few years and then trade it in and get another leased car. And they've never cleaned their car. You know, literally, because in 2 or 3 years, they don't drive a tremendous amount of miles. I think the last car was like 7,000 or 10,000 miles. That's all they drove it. They got a brand new car, drove it 7,000 miles, paid like, I think $14,000 a year or something insane. A lot of money to lease that car. $70,000 Mercedes. They never cleaned it. You know, so they're used to just getting something beautiful and, yeah, I don't have to clean it. They hardly have to fill it with gas, you know. And so they kind of expect that with life. That's how their security paradigm has allowed them to grow up in this idea that, you know, everything's going to be just kind of taken care of easily. And the idea of them like taking something and repairing it, oh, no way, no way, no way. The idea of buying something used, no way, no way, no way. The wonderful thing is this person has a boyfriend now who him and his dad restore vintage cars. And when she told me that, you can imagine how I was just rolling all over the floor, thinking of the irony of that situation, you know, how a person could attract this martial energy into their life through their Rahu. And that's really great that they're attracting it into their lives so that they can learn to appreciate the fact that you can take something and work it into a better thing, you know. So as anyone who drives a car, like a 60s or 70s car around, that they restored and worked on, they're so much happier sitting in that car than any $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 Mercedes or Ferrari or whatever that they could buy new, okay? So these people need to learn that, like, yeah, good things come into our life, that's Venus. But we can take those things and make them better through effort and putting energy into them. And they need to realize they need to put energy and effort into them, or ultimately everything becomes meaningless. Everything is lost, okay? Everything is given up because it has too much defects. So you can imagine after 3 years their car is kind of dirty, like, oh, my car's dirty, time to get a new one, right? Or, okay, I'm going to clean my car, put a lot of effort and go, wow, the car looks like new. It's so amazing how I could clean it so nice. I kind of feel good that I was able to clean that car. I love my car so much. And they start forming an attachment. And then when they look at the car, every time they walk out of the grocery store, they're like, wow, it's so clean. I'm amazed at how clean I was able to make that car. And that makes them feel good about that car. So then they have more fulfillment with that car because they put some effort into it. So that's what these people need to learn. They need to learn to do more Mars, do more fixing, do more fighting for things, do more common sense, how can I make this better kinds of things, do more engineering things, put energy into things that make them better. And don't just think, oh, I get it, this is as good as I get, and when it's not working how I want, I can just get a new one. No, no, no. It's about putting energy into it, making it better. That's what they need to learn. They're very much in need of that. And like I said, lots of times you'll see them impatient. That's the main theme you'll see. A lot of this other stuff you won't notice unless you really look. But you'll certainly notice that they're impatient. That they, they don't want to wait for things to get better. Okay, because they don't think they will. Because from their point of view, things are usually come in easily, and that's nice, and that's it. They don't understand that over time, over effort, things can get better. Okay? Things can be improved upon. And so problems seem really overwhelming to them. They literally don't feel like they can do it. So they just say, no, I don't want that. No, let's do that. I'm not going to do that. And sometimes they'll say they can't do that. But usually they'll just, I've even had them say, no, I don't want to wait. I'm not patient enough for that. And the reason they're not patient enough is because they don't believe that working something over a period of time will give them what they want. They don't believe it'll be a better experience. So ultimately, Ketu will fail them, and their life won't be fulfilling enough, and they'll lose a lot because they won't put the energy into it to maintain it or to fix it when it breaks, and everything breaks eventually, right? Everything gets dirty. Every relationship gets dirty too. Every job gets complicated eventually. If they don't want to fix it, they're going to have to let go of it. So eventually their lives can feel like very meaningless and like they haven't really done with a whole lot, haven't achieved what they wanted to. They don't have a lot in their lives because they haven't fixed things as they've needed to, haven't put energy into things. And at that point, they still won't believe that putting energy in something will really work, but they're like, screw it. I'm sick of everything. I'm just going to go for it, and I'd rather die trying. And so when a Ketu in the sign of Mars person, a Rahu in the sign of Mars person comes in and says, I'd rather die trying this really, big thing that's going to take a lot of effort than continue my life, that's a good sign. That's what you want to hear him say. I'd rather die trying. And for any Rahu position, whenever they say, I'd rather die than do this, and that therefore I'm going to do it, that's a healthy sign. Because the people, usually when it comes to having to move towards Rahu, the feeling is, I'd rather die than do that. So when they are finally saying, I'd rather die than not doing this. So when they decide they're going to go for it, even if it means they're going to die, that's a healthy sign. It means they're really willing to step out of that security paradigm and really step into Rahu. Okay? All right, so enough in Ketu and Venus' sign and Rahu and Mars'